I built a game in Flutter, and today I'm going to show you how I did it. So this is the game. It's called Memories of Sheol. It's a complete concept of my own imagination, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the game, and then I'll talk through a bunch of code. So first things first, this is pure Flutter. So I looked at using Flame. I thought about using Flame, the Flutter game engine. I thought about building this in something outside of Flutter, but it's what I'm comfortable with, and it seemed like a really good fit for what I wanted to build. So this is a dark fantasy RPG. It's kind of inspired by an old game called Scanners, S-C-A-N-N-E-R-Z, and it is a barcode. Scanners was a barcode scanning game where you kind of had like a pocket monster type thing, and you would scan barcodes and you would have things happen. So Memories of Sheol is actually really heavily inspired by that, but instead of having a pocket monster that doesn't really change, you instead end up with a character that has all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to create a new save. There's some text here. I'm not going to read this to you. You can read it on your own if you download the game and try it out for yourself. And then you can choose a class. I'm going to go with, let's do like a thief. You can see some information. So thief starts with the following stats. Now tell me, what is your name? We're going to go with Mr. Thief. Hit enter Sheol. Okay, so the very first thing you see here, there was character creation. There's classes, there's stats, there's all sorts of stuff. We'll get into that too in just a moment. But first, let's continue through the gameplay. Some dialogue. Tapping progresses the dialogue. This is something I could probably make a little bit more clear, and maybe I will do that. I'm still working on this game as well. It's out, it's available to be played, but I do have some other ideas that I want to incorporate, so that's something that I could look at too. Okay, some more dialogue. There's a traveling mechanic. For the sake of debugging, you can hit skip travel. I probably should lower this for the very first conversation, but the idea is that traveling, well, you can click learn more. Different settlements offer different amenities, people, and quests. Traveling between settlements takes real time, and while traveling, you will be unable to use settlement features. You're still able to scan, manage your inventory, and more. Additionally, some scanned events may behave differently while traveling. So we'll let this finish. Okay, it finished. You're in town. There are many things you can do here. Oscus, the old man who guided you here, so maybe we go there first. Some more dialogue. You should make yourself comfortable here, introduce yourself to the huntsman, come back to me. Oh, and if you go wandering off again, that actually is a typo, you'll need some protection. Take this with you. He gives you a shiv. Okay, excellent. So let's go talk to the huntsman. That's what he said to do. So if we go talk to the huntsman, we have more dialogue. We have state, we have game flags, we have all sorts of stuff starting to interact. Okay, now here's a new face. What brings you to Renthal? More dialogue. Some lore about the game. So we'll start to come into that. So he gives you a scrying orb. Death comes for us all, and for some of us, death takes more than others. Those of us unlucky enough to find ourselves in Sheol have had their memories taken from them, and these memories now linger around Sheol. This orb will let you scry into those memories and experience them firsthand, as if you were the individual who had the memory. Some say that Sheol itself was created by our memories, and the memories experienced in Sheol have a way to shape the very world around us. I was pretty proud of that. So if we go talk to the huntsman again, he tells you, hey, great, you're ready to work on those pelts. Normally you'd have to find a memory out in the world and use the scrying orb to unlock it. However, it just so happens that I have an old memory here of a fight with a wolf. Let's make sure you're geared up before scrying. More information about memories. This is a little immersion breaking, but it kind of talks through how scanning works. So you can scan a barcode or a QR code. Once it detects a code, the memory sequence will begin. Memories come in all different shapes and sizes. Some are events, some are encounters. In Sheol, the memories that you experience can alter your view of the world. You may earn experience, find loot, pelts have been mentioned a time or two, and learn of new locations and grow in other ways. Let's make sure that you're equipped for your first memory. Tap on the third tab to open your avatar, then tap on your main hand, equip the shiv, and return to this screen. Okay, so we can go back to here. We can go to our avatar, main hand, equip our shiv, and now it wanted us to return to the screen. So this is the scan tab. So we can also go here in this case. Both of these trigger the dialogue, so either's fine. Oh, I was expecting a bigger weapon. Well, a little knife like that will probably be fine. Now remember, even though these are memories, they can still hurt you. Fight like your life depends on it because, well, it does. I'll go ahead and open this memory for you. Okay, cool. Now we have combat. So there's skills. Classes have different skills. They have mana points. There's health bars. There's names for monsters. It's actually, I probably should have tested this more on the Pixel 2 that I'm running this on because it's a little tight. Thief has a concept called momentum. This is really similar to combo points, at least in terms of generation, but the way they're spent is a little different. In addition to that, momentum for a thief gives you extra damage for each point of momentum you have. So let's see, we could try to mug. You mug your foe, and we've generated a stack of momentum. So now we're going to do a little bit more damage with continual attacks. Okay, so we defeated the wolf. We gained some experience. So we have an experience counter, which means we have a level up system. We have a thing called S. This is currency in the game. And then there's loot, right? So now we can hit end memory. That might be a little bug that I need to fix. Okay, yeah. If you come back, he says, well, all right then, you did it. I'm sure you noticed you took some damage during that fight. Don't worry, healing is as easy as resting, eating food, or drinking alchemical concoctions. Concoctions, that's misspelled. Apparently there are even great sorcerers that can heal you with their magic. I've never seen one, but I've heard stories. Anyway, that's that. Stay safe and come back and see me at my shop sometime. Okay, so now that you've unlocked the combat tutorial, the game starts to change a little bit. So we have this ability to hit scan a memory. So it will try to take a picture. So you can say while using, only this time, don't allow, kind of prohibits you from playing the game. And then you'd have like a barcode, right? I don't think that my... sorry, I never remember how to move in the, I never remember how to move in the emulator. Okay, do I have a barcode in here? I do not. So scanning a barcode will trigger those events. Some might be combat, some might be lore. The lore events give you multiple choice options. Oh, okay, that's also a bug. But backing out apparently took me in, well, I thought I fixed that. I'm not sure why that happened. But backing out took me into another combat encounter. Normally you'd only get these if you successfully scanned, so it seems I have a bug that I thought I fixed, but I did not. So we can mug the shaman. We stole some S. He hits me for 10 damage. I'm probably not going to win. So I can continue to fight. I could look at the items. I currently have none. I could try to flee. I'm just going to continue to fight. Hit for 8 damage, I'm dead. You've been defeated, restore your health, and perhaps try again. Okay. So here you can't scan anymore, you have to restore your health to continue. So the point I'm getting at is like, there's a lot going on here. It's not just well, it's interesting. It is and is not just a Flutter app. There's a lot of game logic, but if you look at this, most of this is menuing. The only thing that is actually kind of out of the ordinary for Flutter was maybe out of the ordinary is the animations for attacking. There's also things like audio that's playing. I'm not sure if you can hear that or not. There's audio sounds that happen whenever you hit an enemy. Certain skills have different sounds. There's background music that plays. Each of the locations in the world have different things. I mentioned game flags earlier. Here's an example of that. Because we're at a certain state in the game, Oscus doesn't have anything for us anymore. Oops. Sorry, I'm still not super used to my magic mouse. Oh, that should be fixed. We have, let's see, save files. So I've got a couple different characters. I'm going to go back to Mr. Thief and go to settings. So there are save slots. You can work with those. Credits. Sarah Gerard did all of the music. They're really great. You can find her on Itch, or this is a link, so if you click it, it will take you to her page. There's codes that you can redeem. So I've got a code that I'll share here. It's called New Game Plus. And if you hit redeem code, you'll get a couple of items. So thank you for being one of the first players, members of Sheol. Please enjoy these items to help you help start your journey off right. These have tooltips, so if you tap on them, you can see exactly what they are. They're iron sabatons, an iron dagger. I was going to say short sword. Wooden bow, arcane tome for magic users, and some potions to kind of help you out. If you try to redeem the code again, it tells you that you've already claimed this code. So in addition to all that, there's some persistence that you can see. There's a debug menu. I'm going to hit supersize me. and it takes me to level 10. So you can see my stats have gone up by a massive amount. Normally when you level, you get to pick where you want to allocate your stats. This little debug option gives me just a ton of extra stats. And the reason I did that is because if we go back to an inn and we rent a room, there may be changes to this in the future where there might be a cost to rent a room. Renthal is pretty open, so this is the starting town, but things may change. So if I hit scan memory again, I think I can cheese this back into that encounter with a troll. Okay, yeah, so there's memory lockouts. This is to prevent you from scanning the same barcode over and over again and experiencing the same fight. Technically, you can experience the same fight from different barcodes. There's a hashing algorithm that takes the barcode and hashes it into an event. So since there are like 100 and something events, and there are millions of possible permutations for barcodes, especially QR codes, if we include those, there's duplicates. You can have a hash collision, which is fine. I just don't want you scanning the exact same thing over and over again. Okay, so I think we've talked a lot about the game. There's dialogue, there's things you can do. You can donate to the church. There's an achievement engine. So if we click on memories, there are quests. Currently we have none. We can pick one up here in just a second. This is the achievement engine. There's like tiers for the achievements, so we're silver tier for these. They kind of guide you, they kind of guide you in some things that you can do. So like make it to Delabar, that's one of the towns. Make it to Mo-Koni, which is one of the towns. The Big Top, which is it's an event town kind of thing. Some spoilery things to look at, to maybe talk a little bit about some of the later things in the game. Some general achievements, so like S Collector, this just keeps track of how much money you've collected, how much money you've donated to the Church of Mosai, all sorts of fun little stuff. So let's grab a quest really quick and then I will be done. So here's a quest. We can click on it. Hey, so I've got a problem, and you handled that wolf so well. I was wondering if you could help me out. No, not more wolves. The issue is slimes. Yeah, the gooey things. We've noticed a rise in their population recently, and to make matters worse, they've been eating my traps in the woods. I was hoping you'd thin out their number for me. I'll pay you for your time, of course. Great, just come back to me once you've killed the slimes. I think 5 should be enough to send a message. Okay, so we can go back. And now if we go to our avatar, click on memories, you can see we have a quest, we have tracking of that, and that's about it. I shouldn't say that's about it, actually. There are quest stages, so once we complete all 5 of these, we'll have a new quest stage, which is to go back and talk to Feldar to turn in the quest. That's one of the simpler quests, but there are some others that are a little more in-depth. Let's talk about the actual code. Okay, great. So this is a Flutter app. I mentioned this. If you've written a Flutter app before, you've probably seen something like this. Let me make this a little bigger, and then we can shrink the debug console since we don't really care at the moment. So a couple things are going on. Standard ensure initialize of the widget bindings. I'm using Firebase. I have some analytics that trigger. I can see how many times people die. I can see what monsters are killing people, so I can kind of tinker with that if I need to. What quests people are completing, what quests people are starting but not completing, just general analytics type stuff. Also using Crashlytics to catch Flutter errors or errors that are in the application, so if things go wrong, I can fix those for people. Platform Dispatcher, this is another Firebase Crashlytics thing. I have an achievement engine. I call init on the achievement engine. This is really straightforward. It sets up an instance that is available, like a static instance, and if you call init, it returns that after it loads it. Whenever things happen, I call these methods on the achievement engine. If you gain S for any reason, I call S granted. If you donate S, I call S donated. If you equip a weapon, I call equip weapon. The reason I do this is because there are some achievements, like for example, mithril weaponry, that trigger whenever you equip a certain weapon. So if you equip a mithril weapon, you get this achievement unlocked, and it sets the value of that achievement to 1, which completes it in this case. Now is a really important time to clarify something. This is sloppy. I have been working on this game for a long time. At some point, I made decisions to try to make everything completely type safe, not running things off of config files. That was a pain. I maybe regret that a little bit, but it did give me some flexibility that I couldn't have had if I didn't do that, which was kind of cool. But I also, what I'm getting at is like, I worked on this for a long time, and at some point I wanted to reach the end. I didn't want to sacrifice quality in gameplay or user experience, but I did sacrifice code quality in some cases. Like, this is sloppy. There are much better ways to do this. But again, it's a game. I've shipped it. I've spent months on it. I guess I have experienced my own crunch time and the exhaustion that comes from it. Another bit of a spoiler, so monster defeated is another one we call anytime you defeat a monster. There are these, there's this academy in one of the cities where every time you kill a monster, you have a monster tracker achievement. This one's hidden. This is a hidden achievement. This keeps track of how many times you've killed a monster. Depending on how many times you have killed that monster, you will get new information about that monster from the academy. So you can go to the academy and study those monsters. Maybe you're having a really hard time with that troll, but you've killed it a couple of times, but you're like, man, I know this troll is resistant to something, but I don't know what it is. You can go to the academy. And if you've killed the troll enough, you'll have enough information to know its like max hit points, how much experience it can give, the range of S that it can drop, some of the items it can drop, and more. So that's why we track that one. Some monsters, there are some achievements tied to them, like the Alpha Dragon, the Omega Dragon, Grogmar. Travel to, anytime you travel to a settlement, we check for achievements. Some stuff that I've deprecated because I over-engineered this at the beginning. I think I should be good to remove that now. And then just some methods to help manage the achievement engine. Okay, let's go back. Oh, interesting. Let's go back to main.dart. Okay, and then we call run app. I have a provider scope, and I say child my app. So this provider is interesting, right? I'm using RiverPod for a state provider. I have this giant object called GameState. We're going to talk about this in just a second. And this provider scope is making sure that I have GameState available. Every piece of in-memory state is stored in GameState. There's, yeah, no, I don't think there's any, okay, that's not entirely true. The achievement engine runs its own state. Everything else is stored in GameState. Sorry, I built this a while back, and I'm just now getting to the point where I am able to record a video for it. So I'm trying to remember 100% of everything. There's this audio frame. This is used to manage audio. So this supports ducking. So if you, I'm using like the widgets binding observer mix-in here to check if the app lifecycle has changed. So if you background the application, I stop the background music. The audio engine has two channels. It's got a foreground channel and a background channel. Background is background music. The foreground is foreground sound effects. So like my sword hits your shield. What sound does that make? That. So that's the audio frame. It references the, well, shoot, where does it reference? Oh yeah, audio engine instance. The audio engine's really lightweight. It uses just audio to take care of managing all that audio. There are two players. There are some paths. The reason I set the path here is I check if I am trying to load a path that already exists. So basically, if I'm trying to load something that's already loaded, don't reload it. Excuse me. But if it's a different sound effect, then do reload it. And the reason why is like I don't want to cut off the background music if it's already playing the thing that it needs to be playing. There are ways to get past that too in a couple scenarios where I do need to actually restart the sound. But so that's the frame. The frame is just making sure that I support audio ducking properly. Okay, so this takes you to the start screen. The start screen is, let's go to the start screen. This, the title. Really straightforward, really easy. This is probably the first big piece of tech debt that you'll see though. So I've got this asset that I load. This is one of those songs by Sarah that are really, really beautiful Final Fantasy style music, which I love that style of music, so that's what I went for. I've got save buttons, so they have slots. Each save button has a future builder, where it calls game saver load game. So this is a class that is really basic. It uses shared preferences here. And I should mention I use shared preferences for all of the game state, which is wild. I never thought I would do that, but it continued to work and I continued to keep using it. So Yeah, so shared save game, load game. So in this case, it takes in a slot. There are 3 slots. We can see that right here, save 1, save 2, save 3. And then you can see we get the shared preferences. There's a really cheeky way of identifying the slots uniquely. And then it builds a game state from the slot. So if there is no game state, then like just generate one. If there is game state, we decode the entire game state object. I thought this would be super slow. I mean, technically it is kind of slow, but it's not noticeably slow. And I bring that up because the way that I am updating and saving things, like auto-saving as certain actions call, really sloppy, but it just serializes it and deserializes it on the fly and then persists it into storage on the fly. We'll see some examples of that in a minute. So yeah, this happens. Here's an interesting dilemma. I added something that triggered that someone could complete and needed to make sure that if someone had completed this previously before a new version of the game came out, that I gave them the item that was added for completing it originally. So this is just an edge case here. I probably should pull this out to a function that's like grant players missing items. But yeah. And then we return the game state. Deleting is exactly what it seems like, just removing the object from shared preferences. Okay, so that was start screen. So let's go back to the start screen. Okay, so we load those and we get the data, player character name, the profession, data, player character profession, and then the level. And we throw that in the button like this, Mr. Thief, level 10 thief. And you can see that's formatted right here. If we don't have that, we return empty instead, which is what you saw at the beginning of this video. So those are the save slots, the save screens. There's a, where is it? Future Builder. Oh, I'm sorry, save button. Yep, okay. So this is an interesting, why a timer of 500 milliseconds? If you're like me, that's probably one of the first things you spotted. So there's this sound. It's a beautiful little interaction sound. I want to make sure that finishes before I navigate you away. So you press the button, that plays its little sound bite, and then you navigate to the new screen. So the next screen is called App Frame. This is everything. So once you're in, this is everything. Everything you see on the screen right now is contained in the app frame. We pass it a slot. So you can see here there's a slot number. And then the app frame has, so it's got like index, the ability to save and refresh. This is what I was talking about this being a hack. Pardon my profanity. Actually, I'm going to leave it. I'm a profane individual. That's how it works. But yeah, you can see the game state provider.notifier.state is equal to encoding the game state, decoding the game state, and calling game state from JSON. So yeah, fun stuff there. But it works. It works. It's fast enough, and it saves the data. This saves the data effectively, and is a hack for cloning it. Some helpers to maybe get a app state frame from the context in case I need to get that in other widgets, child widgets, which I do. You can see a init state. So init state takes that slot number, loads the game, and then sets the state of that game state provider equal to the game state. That's a lot, but it's just setting a value of a provider, a riverpod provider. There's some commented out code that I probably need to delete. But you can see here, we watch the game state provider. We do a couple of things. If the game state's null, which this used to be possible, I don't think this is possible anymore, so I can probably remove this. We show a circular progress indicator. If the user has a character, then we return everything you can see here. The scaffold, the body, the bottom navigation bar, the lack of app bar, all of that. If they don't have a character, then we render the character creation screen that you saw at the beginning of this video. Nothing crazy, just fairly straightforward. Okay, so our bottom navigation bar has our navigation. This is, if you've ever written a bottom nav bar in Flutter, this is exactly what it is. There's no game stuff going on here. There's nothing crazy. There's just a bottom navigation bar and an on-change handler that sets the index. The body here looks at the index that we're looking at and shows you the screen. So we have a home screen. That'd be this one. We have a case 1. So if it is the first case, this one, it's going to be one of two things. There's a conditional here. This is game flags that I talked about. We'll get into game state in a minute. It's the biggest piece of meat for this whole thing. But one thing I really want to drive home is like, this is just Flutter. Like if you've written a Flutter app before, you can build this. It's not, some of the math is a little annoying and it could be a little bit like combat math, not like animation math or anything. That's not too bad. But like tuning the game numbers and that stuff is probably like the hardest part about this. If you know how to build a Flutter app, the rest of it is just what you do when you build a Flutter app. Okay, so there are game flags. If this certain flag is met, then you have a conversation with Feldar. This is the one that I showed you where he starts the memory of the wolf. Otherwise, you get the scan screen, which is the screen right here. Case 3, avatar. You'll notice we're not passing anything into these. Each of these use that game state provider, that riverpod provider, to look up the game state and then render themselves accordingly based on the game state. I thought this would be easier because the game state's effectively holding everything. And so far it's worked out pretty well. Okay, so that's the avatar, and then settings. There's a little bit of information here, like whenever data is deleted, we need to actually take you somewhere. So if you do remove the slot that you're currently playing, for example, then we need to take you back to the start screen. Okay. Anything else that we should talk about before we get into game state? Scan's really basic. Actually, yeah, let's go through scan. Scan's really basic. It's mostly Flutter, like you would expect. I pull in a package called Flutter Barcode Scanner that scans a barcode and parses it. That gives us this view, so I didn't have to build this. Everything you see in the camera lens here is something that you get from the Android emulator. So all this barcode scanner gives us is like this barcode scanning overlay, the ability to flip the camera, oops, like I just did, the ability to toggle flash, and then this cancel button. Hey, back into a fight with the troll. I should be able to beat him this time because I've now leveled up and unlocked more skills. Little spoiler, this is how the thief works. So grants momentum. Technically Mug does too. I probably should update that. And then you can see there are some abilities that use momentum. Deals damage per momentum, consumes all momentum stacks. Pretty straightforward. Deals damage and dazes the target. If you have 3 or more stacks of momentum, consume 3 stacks to also bleed your foe. So this one doesn't take all of your momentum away, but it will consume some of your momentum to add a damage over time onto your foe. I'm going to use this because this brings up another point. That's maybe not the right icon. So this is an ongoing status effect for the fight. In our case, we're bleeding the target, and then I hit him with my shiv and it killed him because I'm massively overleveled for this fight. There are status effects, there are buffs. The entire Bard class is based on buffs. You cast buffs, ongoing buffs, you get them going, and then you have special abilities that change based on your buffs. We'll get into skills. I'm so sorry about that. We will get into skills in a moment, and skills will cover that completely. Okay, so yeah, scan, not much going on. The part where things are interesting here with the scanning is actually the hashing. So we have a handle scan function. This is right down here. So this loads our barcode scanner. This is that view that shows up. We check the response from that. If it's not empty, we check lockouts. So your game state has a lockout. Remember, we saw that when we tried to go back into that fight. It said we were locked out for 1 minute and 30 seconds or whatever. Excuse me. If there is not a lockout, then we get a lockout. We figure out the diff. Excuse me again. and then in minutes and seconds, and then if there is a lockout, we figure out the diff and we display it in minutes and seconds. We tell people, hey, you're locked out. You need to wait this many minutes, this many seconds. If there's not a lockout, then we add a lockout, and we do our little game state hack again, and then we handle barcode. So this returns a result. A result can be one of two things. It can either be a monster result or it can be an event result. So in our case, we check if monster result.monster is not equal to null, then we push on the combat screen. Else we push on the lore event screen. I know you haven't seen a lore event yet, so my apologies. I'll see if I can get one working so we can actually see it. Okay. So the interesting stuff here is this handle barcode method. So this takes in the game state and a barcode string. It figures out the number of supported encounters. So right now with this build, it's 83. And then we hash that barcode and modulus it to figure out like what number we need to end up on. So if we end up on 0, 1, 2, or 3, we give you a wolf. This is I would say a very easy encounter. And the reason that this is so front-loaded is we want to make sure that you have, like, I would rather you more often find wolves than more often find like rare boss monsters, for example. Like they wouldn't be rare if you found them commonly. So this is basically how common the thing can be. So yeah, we have a lot going on here. These are all monsters until we get to events. So you can see here's an event. This event's called Forgotten Shores. This event's called Snowy Hunting. This event's called Something Green. So we have events. Here's more monsters. We've got dragons now. So there's quite a few different things that can happen here and a lot of imports. Again, the imports come from me trying to make sure everything was super type safe. Okay, so we get that value back and then we push in the appropriate thing. So the combat screen is what you see when you get into an encounter. This was our fight with the wolf. This was our fight with the troll ranger, I think is what we fought. It takes in a monster. It has a single ticker provider state mix-in for some animations. It has a late game state that we get from our provider right there. Whenever we initialize the state, we clear your buffs. This was a design decision. This prevents you from carrying buffs from combat to combat. So you can't like fight a wolf and spend the whole time buffing and then go fight a boss and start the fight with all of your buffs. Because that's exactly what I did when I was playing this, and I was like, that feels really cheeky and I don't want to, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of cheeky strategies. Okay, there's an animation controller here. We start with actions enabled. This is just a flag that currently the player gets the first turn. I kind of want to leverage some calculation and some RNG to determine who gets to go first. We'll see if I change that. But this is a flag. If this is true, your buttons are enabled. If it's false, your buttons are disabled. Simple enough. We'll see how that's used here in a moment. If you have combo points, we set them to 0. Technically, everyone has combo points, but the only people who actually generate them or use them are thieves. And then we have a thing called combat engine. So we set the engine equal to the combat engine. This is like a lot of where the math and logic and stuff comes into play, and we can talk about that too. So the animation controller has a status listener called update status. So if we look at this, basically if it's completed, we reset the animation. That's it. We use animations for two different things on the screen. Whenever you connect with a monster, it shakes a little bit to show that you've impacted it. And then also the monster's health bar, which isn't another component, animates down to its new value. So it doesn't happen right away. It's not like chunk, it's slide down to the new value. Okay, I have a concept called dolls. The doll is what models your character. So like this is a doll, for example. There's a reference doll. This is literally the player character doll with everything being a reference to the actual class that models the player's equipment. Calling toDoll on that hydrates the class and gives you a new version of the class where everything is not references to the equipment, but is instead the actual equipment. This gives us access to methods like all equipment. And the reason I have all equipment is like there are some equipment in the game that triggers every round in combat. So for example, you may have an amulet that gives you, this is not in the game, but just as a very simplified example, an amulet that gives you 5 HP every single turn in combat. Or you have a cloak that increases your, well, passive buffs are different, but basically anything that needs to happen every turn gets factored into all equipment. So equipment can have different actions, and we'll get to equipment in just a moment. Okay. Whenever we dispose, we just clean up so we don't have memory leaks. There's nothing crazy going on here. You probably have done all these things before. Okay, it's a scaffold. There's an app bar. We extend the body behind the app bar. We use an asset image to get the background for a monster. So a monster has get background. So like certain vampires can only be found in caves, for example, or like, oh, there's a couple exceptions. But basically there's logic to determine, based on the game state, what background we should return. And you'll see this a lot. Me passing game state into all sorts of different things. And the idea here is we can look at the game state and make decisions to return specific values based on that state. So this get background function, in our case of the wolf, always returns the forest. In the case of that troll, it most of the time returns the forest. There's some RNG that it might be somewhere else. There are a lot of monsters that are in a lot of different locations. There's a color filter. This just darkens the background a little bit so that the monster kind of sticks out over the background and doesn't super blend in. We use a stack here. Our stack gives us a animated builder. So we have a child that's an animated builder in our stack. Here's our animation controller. Tiny little bit of animation math. It's really not much. But this is what happens. This is what causes the monster to wiggle whenever it gets hit, or kind of like slide to the left and to the right, to indicate that you have indeed hit the monster. And then we have a monster box. The monster box is the monster. This is what renders it. This is what renders the monster's health bar. This monster value is being updated in real time. So this is a mutable reference. The health bar is mutable, for example. Yeah, that's handled. And then you saw that buff icon that I mentioned might be the wrong icon, so that might be another thing to fix. This is for each buff, you have a buff bar and then a badge that shows how long that buff lasts. Honestly, the best way to do this would be to go back to title, grab a bard, and then let's trigger, okay, this character hasn't done the combat tutorial. So hit melody. Melody is a heal over time, so melody restored 3 HP, bards are broken. Not really, but early game they're very strong because the healing is pretty front loaded to make sure that you can survive encounters. I want to make it worthwhile to cast. Anyways, so you can see here's that badge. That 2 is a badge. So we have a badge that shows the duration minus the buff tick. So basically the amount of time that you have left on the buff. And then there's an icon, and then there's a tooltip. So you can see melody, 2 turns remain. Okay, and then there's an image asset for each of those. I'm going to flee. Oh no. I'm going to hit supersize me. This is a debug thing. Players can't do this. To supersize me, it gives me like every weapon in the game too. That's fun. Oh no, it doesn't. Just swords. It gives me just swords. No, okay. I'm losing my mind. It doesn't give me anything. Why does this character have all the swords? I don't know. I was debugging some stuff with him, so let's give him a sword. Why not? And actually, I know he doesn't have all of them because I missed the one that I added most recently in that list. Okay, so then you have your player stats in combat. Okay. Scan memory, cancel. Cancel, please. Okay, cool. So I just supersized this character, so he's level 10 now with way overpowered stats, especially for a troll shaman fight. but I wanted to show you the stats. So the player's combat stats, that's this. HP, MP, and then if you have combo points, it shows combo points here. The action box is this. This actions enabled flag is the flag I mentioned earlier in this screen. This gets set to false when it's not your turn. So once you take an action, this gets set to false. This prevents you from taking a bunch of actions back to back to back, and it gives the enemy a turn to react. There's this thing called exhaustion. There are a couple classes with very, very strong abilities that if they don't end the fight, your next turn will be spent exhausted and you can't take a turn. So you can see here, for example, exhaustion pressed, skip turn. Attack pressed on action, skill pressed on skill, item pressed on item. There's some code to handle all of that. So you can see, for example, skill shows the bottom sheet right here. You can see, like, let's play melody. So we play melody. Troll Shaman hit me for 9 damage. Damn, that hurt. Okay, so we have the bottom sheet. And then we have a list tile. Basically, this shows all of the costs. It manages your MP right here. This probably isn't the best spot for this. The idea here was get the game delivered, which is a recurring theme throughout this. So there's like a lot of small things I could clean up. Here's a little spoiler for the Bard. So they get a heal over time, a damage over time, a thing called staccato, which processes each of your active buffs, performing the combat action with them without increasing the tick count. So for example, if you have melody up and you have dissonance up and you cast staccato, it will trigger both of these, and then your turn will end, and then it will trigger them again. Refrain refreshes your active buffs. I think I'm just going to kill this shaman with dissonance. Yep. And then they have some other abilities. I don't want to spoil them all too much, or else you wouldn't want to play a bard. But they're pretty fun. They're one of my favorite classes. Okay. A state that you shouldn't be able to get to and a to-do. It wouldn't be a project without one of those. And then basically there's skills and there's buffs. So in the case of the first two abilities, those were buffs for the bard. And then the following two were skills. So buffs do things differently. They add a buff to the buff bar. The buffs get triggered at the end of combat round. So you take your turn, the Troll Shaman takes their turn, then buffs get triggered. Skills get triggered right away. Okay, skip turn does exactly what it seems like. You set actions enabled to false, and then you wait your turn. On item, the items are really similar. I don't think this character has any. It's basically, man, why do I keep doing that? It's also a bottom sheet. It tells you a little bit about the item and what you can expect. It's got a description. It's not got like stats or numbers. Excuse me. And it has, you interact with one, and then that shows you, it doesn't show you. It processes a combat action for that item. So like, for example, a health potion's combat item might be to give you anywhere from 2 to 10 HP, or something like that. Yeah. If you add a buff, it adds buffs to the game state, so the game state kind of manages all of this. And then waits a split second and then handles the monster turn. On skill selected, there's a couple interesting things here. This one's fun. But it's basically the same flow, which is do a combat action, wait a second, let the monster take its turn. There's an ability called Tricast. Wizards, it's the capstone for wizards, or magicians, sorry. And then it's the alchemist has a random chance to like access any buff in the game, and Tricast is one of those buffs. So the magician and the alchemist can get a buff called Tricast, which makes their next skill selected trigger 3 times instead of just 1 time, which is kind of fun. It allows the fantasy of the magician throwing these massive fireballs or throwing 3 fireballs that just incinerate their foe. Ideally incinerate their foe, but you know, by the time you get your capstone, the things that you're wanting to fight have massive health bars and resistances and damage reduction, which are all math items that I've mentioned previously that are factored into the game. And then you have actions. There's a sound effect that gets played here. This is just your standard, I'm gonna attack. Handle monster turn, so basically we check to see if the monster HP is greater than 0. If it is, then the monster gets to attack. If it's dazed, there's a debuff on monsters called dazed, and they have a 50% chance to miss their next turn, or 33% chance to miss their next turn. Wait, exclusive. So yeah, 50% chance. To do, remove some duplicate code. Basically, every monster has a function called get combat action. This allows some randomness, so maybe the monster will bite you one time and it'll punch you the next time, instead of just having it be a property. It's a function, so we can have some randomness in there. And then we execute that action on the game state, and we pass in the monster here. So that action could heal the monster. For example, there is a very strong boss that has the ability to heal herself when she damages you. Yeah, and then we show a snack bar. The snack bar just lets you know what happened. So if you get hit for 15 damage, like we saw when the Troll Shaman hit me back, it hit me for 9 damage. That snack bar comes up and shows you the damage that you were taking and how you took it. There's some analytics. So for example, if you die to a monster, I log that because I want to know what is killing players. And then we show the player defeated dialogue. If this is where we process combat buffs. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. Basically, we process every buff. There are things called buff templates. So the buff template is shared. The buff itself has like the duration. But the template has all the stuff that happens whenever a buff tick happens. So a tick is every turn you get a new tick. There are certain buffs that do things differently depending on the tick that they're on. So like there's a burning debuff that ramps up. Or sorry, I don't remember if that's burning or bleeding, but we can check. One of the debuffs does a little bit of damage, and then the next turn it does more damage, and then the next turn it does more damage. So again, going back to the bard, who can refresh the duration, you can kind of manipulate that in a way that is beneficial for you. If those buffs resolve, we add them to a list called resolve buffs, and then we remove them from the game state. And then finally, if everything's still mounted, we haven't navigated away yet, then I want to make it so your actions are enabled, and you can take your turn again. Okay. Let's talk about combat engine. So there's a bunch of math, and not all of it's in here, but there's some logic, and it's game logic, and I don't know if it's very good or not. It seems to be working well for me. I've enjoyed playing the game so far. But basically there's an on-monster defeated method here that gets called, that gives you XP based off the monster's XP value, gets drops, and then updates your inventory to include the items that drop. Gives you a random amount of essence from the monster's S range. So the monster has a range of essence that it can drop. Like for example, it could drop 4 to 10 essence, and then you might roll a 6. That gives you that essence. This is that deprecated method that I talked about, so I need to remove that and replace it with a thing that is not deprecated. A function for calculating the base damage. It uses a stat depending on the weapon you have equipped. And then you have the ability to override that stat. You have additional crit chance, additional crit damage, a damage modifier. So for example, the knight has stances, so the knight will use abilities that shift them into stances. There's a defensive stance, there's an offensive stance, there's a couple more. The defensive stance reduces the damage you do, but also reduces the damage you take. The offensive stance increases the damage you do, but also increases the damage you take. So some flexibility there. We use the skill type here because we also do a check for certain cases to see, well, I thought so. Do we not? Am I wrong? I am wrong. We don't actually use the skill type. Why was that added? Oh, because skill types were originally built into three types. Damage, healing, buff. That has been mostly refactored out, so we probably can remove this. So we check for buffs. We fold all of our buffs into this thing called buffable stats. This is another stat model, similar to the one that the player character has. So you can see here, if we hover over it, you've got player stats, damage absorption, damage reduction, damage multiplier, spell damage multiplier, dodge chance. We come up with those stats based on your player stats, and then also based on the buffs that you have in effect. So there's a buff called dodge up, which gives you increased dodge chance. That stuff gets factored in, we grab those buffable stats, and then we use these stats to determine the total value of your damage that gets put into the calculation. We look at your right hand weapon. This is your primary hand weapon. Everyone's right-handed. Sorry, lefties. But if you're using a bow, we force agility. If you're using a dagger, we force agility. But the exception here is, since everyone gets a shiv to start with, I don't necessarily want to force your agility. I want you to just use whatever stat is most applicable for you there. And by most applicable, I mean I do choose between strength and agility. But I don't want to force you into agility if the only weapon you have is a shiv. So if you have a shiv equipped, you can use strength. And then hammers for strength. If you have a stat override, ignore all of that and instead use the stat override. We do some stuff to calculate damage. We calculate if there's a crit. We have a get crit chance modifier method for the PC. So certain equipment gives you crit chance. You can get additional crit chance from your buffs, or if it's passed in for whatever reason. So for example, certain skills have a high crit chance, but maybe low crit modifier, that type of stuff. We also flag whether it is a crit, and then we return that. There's a damage modifier here. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's a damage modifier. So if you do 1.25x damage for whatever reason, maybe your equipment gives you a little bit of extra damage, or your buffs give you quite a bit more damage, that gets factored in. We apply that combo point damage, so you get a percentage of extra damage based on how many combo points you have. Okay. And then we return a damage calc result and whether it is or isn't a crit. And the reason we return whether it is or isn't a crit, we render things differently depending on if it is a crit. And then some skills behave differently depending on how they crit. For example, I think it's the ranger has a skill, or the archer has a skill, where they shoot an arrow, and if it's a crit, it also triggers bleeding on the foe. So they take a damage over time for a couple turns because they're bleeding. A little bit of an oddity here, calculating a spirit heal. So there are 5 different attributes. I really should have mentioned this earlier. We can find them on the player page. Strength, constitution, spirit, agility, arcane. Spirit is a bit of a weirder... it's used for some of the more complicated classes. And don't get me wrong, it also affects like bards. Bards' primary stats are split between spirit and arcane. So it's also like the caveat there is like you also probably want agility if you're using an agility weapon. And every time you level up, you get to pick where you want to put your stats. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you play your class, which is very important to me. Spirit ended up being a very interesting thing. It's very good at healing and a couple of other things, but it's not super useful in a lot of other scenarios. So like you probably wouldn't want to build a pure spirit character. You can, and maybe you'll have some success with it, but you might not want to. And the reason I mention this is because there are 2 different methods here. There's constitution heals and spirit heals. Spirit heals heal way harder. Constitution heals do not heal as hard. And then part of that is if you have high constitution, you have high health. So you might not necessarily have high constitution or high health here when you have the spirit one. So yeah, just something to think about. And a lot of this is just me trying things and tinkering with the numbers. They're probably not perfect, but I am pretty happy with how they turned out now. Okay, I've been putting this off. Let's talk about the game engine. Game engine? Am I losing my mind? Oh, game state. That's what it's called, sorry. Okay, this really is not that long of a class, but there are so many things going on. So the first thing here, everything's serializable. I use JSON serializable. I store this in shared preferences. I don't use Hive. I don't use some other database. I don't push it to a cloud server. In fact, this does not require internet at all. The analytics just won't get logged if you don't have a connection, which, whatever, that's fine. I would love to know if a monster killed you or what quest you completed, but I would rather you be able to play my game on a plane or without me taking all your data and needing to manage all that for you. All your data stays on your device. Sorry. Okay. Oh, I just hit something. We good? We good. Okay. There are game flags. These are the flags that I was talking about. There will be a lot more. So there's a person that you can meet, and it's relevant for the story. Whether you have a scrying orb is relevant for the story. Whether you've done the combat tutorial, whether you've received the post-combat tutorial speech, whether you're a guild member, whether you have a bank imprint. Quickly talking about those. Each save slot's unique, but the bank allows you to put things that can be accessed across save slots. So you just have to have a soul imprint for the bank, and it turns out all of your characters share the same soul. So that allows you to share items. So if you're playing your knight and you get a really cool bow and you're like, I'm not going to use this bow on my knight, you can put it in the bank and then make an archer or a bard or a thief or anyone that might want to use a bow, a wizard if you want. I don't really care. And not only do I not care, but you can build a magician or a warrior that uses a bow just fine. Anyways, so you can put that in the bank, and then your other characters, once they get access to the bank, can take it out. We keep track of your progression with Oscus. He's a character that seems to exist throughout the entire story for one reason or another. No spoilers there. Whether you've done the bank tutorial, whether you've done the soul well tutorial, huge spoiler right there, whether your character is or is not a vampire, whatever, that's fine. If you've made it this far in the video, you can have some spoilers. And whether they can go to Makanai, whether they can go to Delabar, whether they can go to Big Top, all of the above. The soul well is interesting. It's a building. We'll talk about buildings and when we talk about settlements, which we'll get to shortly. Basic serialization, so if you've used JSON serializable before, you've seen this before. Save slots, these are just game states. 1, 2, 3, that's it. Serializable, we use them as you'd expect. Okay, so hang on, if we were talking about game states, what were we talking about earlier? Those are the game flags. So we started with game flags, we talked about save slots, this is the game state. This is also serializable, however, it's got some interesting oddities. Okay. The player character. This is your character. We can look at this. You've got stats, a name, a profession, HP, MP, level, XP, currency. You have your reference doll. You have inventory. Your inventory is an int of ints. So this is the item ID. So this is a reference, and this is the count. So if you have 4 shivs, if the shiv is item ID 1, for example, it would be 1 is the key, and then you have 4 as the value. This gets hydrated, similar to how we hydrate the reference doll whenever you are managing your inventory. Some helpers on the player, so like getting max HP, getting the max MP, take damage, so a function that causes the player to take damage, so you factor in damage reduction, damage absorption, block chance, dodge chance, shields give block chance. The damage, you apply that damage, you do some math, prevent accidentally healing a monster, which is important. Actually, this would be a player in this case, but you don't want to like take damage and heal from it. If block chance triggers, reduce the damage by 1/3. Fun fact, that's what block chance does. Damage reduction. So these are a bunch of helpers that take the reference doll, convert it to a full doll, parse all the equipment, and calculate the damage reduction. This is bad. Like, they basically all do the same thing, and this is expensive. Actually, sorry, this is expensive. This is an expensive interaction. I should refactor this into something that just gives me all the stats, so I don't have to call this every single time. Or maybe I cache the values or something. I guess what I'm getting at is, like, there are some things that can be improved, and this is by no means perfect. Okay, yeah, more stats, parsing the dolls, XP to next level, getting your strength, same thing. Reference doll converts all of the equipment, hydrates it, gets the strength modifier of that equipment, and then adds it to the base. Same thing here, agility, constitution, spirit, arcane. Get your damage modifier, so this factors in your buffs, it folds in damage modifier here. Yeah, if you have a damage multiplier, it gets added. Spell damage multiplier, same thing. Crit damage modifier, same thing. Crit chance modifier, same thing. A function called grant items. This grants items to a player. Remove item. So if you use a potion, for example, it's going to decrease the count of those items that you have by 1, and then cleans up keys that are no longer present, or that no longer need to be present. a method called equip and unequip. Sorry, this is unequip. So you pass in a slot, it removes the thing in that slot. You pass in, here's one called equip. You pass in equipment, it identifies the slot that needs to go into and then equips it to that slot. Again, keep in mind these are by reference, so we're passing in the ID of the thing. Methods to grant HP, grant S, donate S to the church, set HP, grant MP. Whether the player or not has a light source, that might be relevant for something too. The skills that a player has, man, we haven't even talked about skills. Constructor, serialization, and then player stats. The stats are exactly what they seem like. It's just a class here that models strength, agility, constitution, spirit, and arcane, and then gives you the ability to combine player stats. So if you have two stats for whatever reason you might need that, you can shove them together and get a value from them all. Your professions. This is just some information about the professions you can choose and an enum to sift through them. And then the skills. These are all defined in another file. It's actually really sloppy, so that'll be fun. But you can see, basically, if you're an alchemist, you get alchemist skills. And if you're an archer, you get archer skills. We only give you the skills that you meet the level requirement for. So there's that. I've thought about replacing this with a skill tree. I love the idea of replacing it with a skill tree. I will probably try to do that, but it's just not a priority at the moment. Starting stats, so you can see your starting stats, all that jazz. Okay, so that's the meat and potatoes of the player. Let's go back to the game state. Okay, you have a slot number. It's just an int. There's nothing special going on there. Claimed reward codes. So if you claim a reward code, it gets listed here, so you can't reclaim it. Captured soul monster. So if I mentioned the soul well previously. If you do the soul well tutorial and you get access to an item. One of the frustrations I had with the game was like, I don't always have a barcode with me, and I don't want to like take this QR code. Can you see it? Yeah. I don't want to take this QR code with me everywhere if I know this has a monster that I want to fight. I mean, you can make a little book of QR codes or barcodes if you want to. It sounds kind of cool, I guess. But the point that I'm getting at is like when you fight a monster and you have completed the soul well, you gain access to an item that allows you to capture a monster's soul in the gem. The item that you have. You can take that item to a soul well, pay a small fee, and then you will get to fight that monster on demand. There is no lockout. There is no, you still get rewards. The only caveat is you do not get S rewards. So you can't just ballparking random numbers again. If it costs 10 essence to fight the monster and it drops 20 every time, at least 20 every time, you can't just keep fighting it like that. It does still drop equipment though, so you can use it to farm equipment or rare drops and that type of stuff. So we keep track of that monster here. The default value is null from JSON. We call this new monster function that's defined below. Settlements, so we just store the current settlement that the player's at. We store the settlement that the player's traveling to. We store the time that traveling ends. So this is the real-time traveling thing that I showed you at the very, very beginning of the game. We have an instance of game flags. We have encounter lockouts. You can see your lockouts here. Quest manager, there's not a ton going on in the quest manager. We may skip that. It's just a class that is basically a glorified map and some. You know what? We probably won't skip it. We'll talk about it in a minute. A list of the buffs that you have, a list of your value for combo points, some helpers for adding a buff, granting combo points, new quest manager, game state from JSON, new encounter lockouts to JSON, new monster. Okay. Let's talk about the quest manager. So the quest manager is a class. You have quest markers. So where is this? Okay, so you have a quest progress marker. So you have a quest name, you have a current step, the count of progress on the current step. For example, this is defeat the slimes. Current step 1, because step 0, actually no, it'd be step 0. So step 0 would be kill 5 slimes. The count, the progress on the current step would be 0 out of 5 because we haven't killed any slimes yet. You kill a slime, the count goes up. Whether it's complete or not, true or false. Okay. So that's our quest progress marker. And we have a quest. The quest has a name. This would be Feldar needs you to kill slimes, or whatever the quest was. The description. This tells you Feldar needs you to go out into the fields and kill 5 slimes because they've been harassing his forge, or whatever. Whether it's started or not, the steps that are available for the quest, and then whether it's completed. There are different step types. You can kill, donate, fetch, explore, talk, craft, or use. There are quest steps. The step has a description, whether it's completed or not, whether it's linear. This doesn't really work yet. But this is whether it requires the previous steps to be completed before this step can be completed. Currently, everything's linear. The plan is like if you have a quest that's like go talk to Oscus and go talk to Feldar, it doesn't really matter the order you complete them in that case, so allowing you to do both. The step type, the number of times the step needs to be fulfilled. The step check. So this is a function that checks whether something has been completed or not. On complete, whether it is or is not completed. Sorry, not whether it is or is not completed. The function that gets called when it is completed. So for example, setting game flags, granting items to your inventory, granting essence, granting experience. Actually, those are handled right down here. But basically granting, allows access to the game state should you want or need to modify it. We'll see an example here in a minute. That probably would be the best case. Item rewards, and then a constructor. Okay, so this is that quest. This is slime time, the first quest that Feldar gives you. So its name is slime time, completed description, you've eased Feldar's concerns about the growing slime population, is started, false. Steps, quest step, monster, description, kill 5 slimes, basically. Count 5, dialogue. So these are the dialogue items that are part of this quest step. Step type, kill. Step check. So this is called whenever a monster is killed, and then we check if you kill a blood ooze, a pink slime, a blue ooze, or a red slime, then this is true. Increment the step counter. Otherwise, false. Once you've completed that step, you get your next one. Return to Feldar and tell him that you've solved the slime problem. Type, talk, XP reward, 50, S reward, 25. Dialogue. Step check. If character is Feldar, true, you're done. That's it. Just go back to him. And then, oh, this is a really good example. Part of the dialogue here, if you read this, you can see, if you're feeling a bit too big for Renthal, why not make a pilgrimage to Ma Konai? I've never been, but I imagine it'll keep you far busier than old Renthal will. Let me mark it on your map. This on complete is being used to adjust a game flag to allow you to travel to a new location. Also, small spoiler, this is how you unlock, one of the ways that you can unlock Ma Konai. Okay, so that's the quest manager in a nutshell. There are some helpers here. We use those quest markers. Has quest, start quest, just some helpers here. Track kill, track dialogue, quest check, get quest marker for quest, all that jazz. Okay, where did we leave off? So we talked about the game state. Let's talk about skills, and then we're almost done. This has been a very long video. Okay, there is a lot going on in this file. It's pretty big. It's 1,000 lines of code. This has all the skills in it. This probably isn't the best way to handle this, but it is the way that I handled it. This is what a skill looks like. It has a name, a description, a level. This is the required level to be to cast the skill. MP cost, combat action, buff function. So it will be one or the other. Excuse me. We could model this better. There's definitely a better way to model this. Maybe one day I'll refactor it and model it that way. Your skill type can be one of the following: spell, attack, buff, heal, or other. And then there's an icon asset path that we capture here. Combat actions take place right away. Buffs are handled a little bit differently because they look at the game state to determine things. And then they return a buff. That's it. It takes in a game state and returns a buff. Combat action has a function on it called action. This takes in a game state and a monster and returns a string. So it's a function that can modify game state or influence a monster. Returns description of the action. Example: your robes sparkly. Your robes sparkle and restore 5 MP. Okay, let's go back. With that in mind, there are just massive arrays here of all the skills, all the math behind them. I'm just going to highlight a couple that I really like. So this is an alchemist skill called Create Elixir. It has a description: quickly and haphazardly brew an elixir, then drink it. The random ingredients may have unexpected requests. Hey look, TriCast, I mentioned that earlier. This just gives you a buff. And the reason that this is a function is because of this one right here. This is what inspired me to make it a function. Mainly because I just take all these things, I shuffle them, I grab the first one and use that as a buff template and return a new buff for a random duration. The one thing to be aware of, you don't get up to 4 turns of TriCast here, or up to 3 turns of TriCast, because TriCast clears itself whenever you use it. But the rest of them you could get up to 3 turns of. And some of these are pretty good. We'll need to talk about buffs too, I guess, so let's do that now. There are 2 different types of buffs. There are buffs that give buffable stats. So this one gives a damage multiplier of 2.5. So you get fired up, you start hitting like a truck. Pretty excited to get that buff if you are RNGing into it as an alchemist. I actually don't know if there's another way to get it outside of alchemist. So there are 3 types of buffs. Sorry, this is a marker buff. This one has some use somewhere else in the game code that breaks the normal flow of being used in combat as is. And basically, Icicle Frosted, this stacks. You get enough stacks of Icicle Frosted, it stuns your foe. They become frozen solid. And then I also think your next hit removes the stun and then does massive damage or something too. I need to remember exactly. Hopped Up on Fungus. This one's fun. This is a buff called Hopped Up on Fungus. I won't tell you how you get this. You can explore. But this gives you some damage absorption, some damage multiplier, some damage chance, and some stats. They may be positive, they may be negative. Who knows? Maybe do or do not hop up on fungus. Here's another buff. This one has a combat action. This one's called Burning. So this is the one that increases with your ticks. So the farther into the buff you are, the more damage this will deal. Remember, the Bard has an ability called Staccato that takes your active buffs and applies the combat action. This isn't, maybe you don't want to staccato, maybe you do. You can staccato at the beginning, but when you really want to staccato this one is towards the end, towards the last couple of ticks, because it does way more damage. But yeah, those are the 3 different types of buffs: stats, combat action, and then marker buffs. Here's another example. This one's called Armor Up. It's a buff that gives you damage absorption based on the maximum value. So you'll always get at least 1 out of it, but it will get the integer value of your constitution divided by 3. And give you one of those for damage absorption. So high constitution, high damage absorption for a couple turns. Any other super cool ones? Here's the stances I was talking about. So damage reduction, damage multiplier. This is the knight stance called offensive stance. There's another one here called defensive stance that basically does the inverse. This is actually really strong. I might need to tinker with this. That's a lot of damage reduction. Okay, so skills. Let's find a couple more fun ones. Inject poison. This one it just adds a buff template. Acid spray, just a lot of skill-specific stuff going on here. Uses some RNG to determine the count. The count determines how many times this hits. So this could hit multiple times. Restoration elixir. This heals you some HP at MP. Maybe one day might have a 1-turn buff that prevents death. Who knows? Who knows? This is the... So this fires a special arrow with a barb tipped, causes bleeding in addition to damage. Archers also get first aid, so they get the ability to bandage their wounds and have a small heal. Snipe, an attack that never misses and ignores enemy defense. Almost every class has something like this that allows them to ignore enemy defense. They're usually expensive. Like the MP cost here is high, the level cost is kind of high, and part of the reason why is as you get farther and farther into the game, you will encounter more and more monsters that have higher and higher defenses. And some of that can be really hard to work with. So you need to mix and match your skills in a way that can ignore defense, or maybe you have some buffs that lower the enemy's defense, or you just buff yourself to really increase your damage and just ignore the fact that they have a lot of defense. You have a lot of options. Astrologer is one of my favorite classes. It's very RNG based. You can see that in the very first thing they get called Sun's Embrace. Heal yourself or damage an enemy, ignoring their defense. So you have a chance of heal. Biased towards not healing a healthy character. It's no fun to be full HP and get healed from to heal damage that doesn't exist. So if you are full health or above half of your max HP, we bias towards not healing. It's a little bit of game-specific logic that's not super relevant for anything, I guess, unless you're playing an astrologer, in which case you might want to know that. Okay, next stint. Yeah, we figure out whether you're going to heal. If you heal, we use a spirit heal because astrologers are spirit-based. Otherwise, we calculate base damage, we use spirit as the stat override, and then we apply damage, ignoring defense. This is basically the standard procedure for most of these combat buffs. There are some, or the combat skills, there are some that are out of the ordinary a little bit, but for the most part, this is it. Okay, Moon's Teardrop. So this one's an attack, deals a random amount of damage to an enemy and restore a small amount of mana. It's just something that can kind of help you keep your mana up. The astrologer, by design, is not going to do jack when it comes to attacking with a weapon. So the plan for the astrologer is at level 1, Sun's Embrace yourself through combat and hope you don't run out of mana. If you do, smack things with your stick and hope for the best. At level 2, this is probably going to replace your normal attack. You basically will be using Moon's Teardrop, hoping to get more mana back than you're spending, which really is not too difficult because the MP cost is kind of low. And then you can see here that the MP heal is 0 to 4 plus your spirit divided by 2. So with enough spirit, you're always restoring enough mana. These are actually incomplete skills. So I know I said the astrologer is one of my favorite classes so far. It's actually not in the game. I mean, it's clearly in the code, but it's not accessible in the game yet. I'm looking to get that online soon. I have to finish those skills though. Otherwise people would be very mad if the astrologer players started to level up and they only got 2 skills. Bard skills, like I said, these are mostly buff related. Some stuff that looks at the game state and does some things based on that. This one resets the ticks for all of your buffs to keep them running. And then this one does, for each active buff, you deal damage to your foe. So you get a lot of buffs going, and then you hit like a truck, hopefully. The Knight has some stuff, so it's got defensive strike, it's got offensive strike. These are the ones that strike your foe, then take a stance. Feint, I'm not sure how that's pronounced now that I think about it. Shield Wall, this is a buff, increases your defense by quite a bit for a period of time. So like, you can use your imagination, but if you are low on health and you know you need to heal the next couple of turns and you're like, I'm going to consume some potions. Maybe you want to use this first so you're taking less damage while you're healing. Maybe you have identified a pattern in the way that a monster attacks, and maybe it punches you 3 times and then hits you really hard, and you've been counting the attacks, and you know that or you think that it's going to hit you really hard next turn. Shield Wall, a lot of options. Critical variance, like high critical variance attacks, they all exist. Last Stand's kind of fun. Deals massive damage to both you and your foe. Deals extra damage the lower your health is. Will not reduce your health below 1 hit point. It's exactly what it sounds like. If things aren't going your way, Last Stand, pray for the best. Magicians, they have kind of what it seems like. Has a chance to deal massive damage. This is a thing that pops up in some skills, but massive damage is like, it's a lot. So you have a chance to deal like a ton of damage. Scholar's another class that I took. This one's inspired by Final Fantasy, but it's inspired by Final Fantasy in name and like theme, but not so much in gameplay. You don't have carbuncles, you don't have pets or anything like that, but it's more being a like battle tactician, someone who's very educated in the ways of combat. So they have some self-healing, they have some strikes that ignore defense. Oh, they are missing some skills too, I should fix that. Thief, and so on and so forth. I don't need to go through all these skills, that would be a long use of time. We have some screens. So this is the at town screen. That is what this one looks like. So if you leave this town and travel to another, well, we're already at Renthal, so we can't really travel. But this is at town. The screen you saw that said you're traveling for 30 seconds, that's the traveling screen. I am probably going to add a new feature to this soon. I won't spoil it, but there will be a new screen here. Yeah, so when you're at town, why does it loop this? A tale through your journey, that's interesting. I'm not sure how this works. All of the settlements have different sound effects that do play, like I can test that now, but this one seems to be hard-coded here. I wonder if this gets started and then it immediately overrides it with another one. But yeah, so this is in town, so you're in town, you can do these things. The items you can do here changed based on the town that you're in. Back to Flutter for a moment. This is just a list view. It's separated. When you tap on one of these, it navigates you, and you have a back arrow here. There's like, I mean, it's just Flutter. And the reason I'm saying that, I sound a little sad when I say that now that I'm hearing myself say it, but it's not because I'm sad. I'm trying to drive home a point that if you can build a Flutter application, you can build a game. And it may not be a 3D first-person clutch shooter or something, but if you want to build something and make it a game, you can do that. You can build the game logic, you can build the math. You have all those options. And go do it. Okay, so yeah, you can leave the town. There are different structures in here. I also won't go into these, but basically you have different options. Some of them have people associated with them. There's a settlement list here in, well, shoot, where is it? Huh, yeah, I'm not sure where that is. That's fine. Why is level up screen in there? Okay. Anyways, there's a list of settlements. You know what? We can find it really quick. Settlement list. 4 different settlements. More will be added. We get the settlement, some information about it, the structures that exist in it. So for example, there's a standalone character structure called Oscus, the old man who guided you here. There's a church. There's a huntsman. Feldar is the character there. There's an inn. The character there is Teresa. We can go visit her. You want to go talk to Teresa? Okay, inn. I remember when I first found myself in Renthal. Oscus helped me find my way here from the source. He's a kind man, even if he is a bit strange. No, I've never left Renthal. It's a bit strange, but when I came to this town, I found this building just abandoned, like it was waiting for me. I tried to think about what I could do with it, and I thought, well, I could open a tavern. Anyways, end of conversation. Seems quite mysterious, right? If you want to find out more, Memories of Sheol, available on Android and iOS for 99 cents. Anyways, pardon me shelling out. I would love to have more people play this and tell me their thoughts, because I've had a lot of fun building it, so I will shell out for it if I can. More settlements. So here's a little bit of a spoiler. Here's what you can expect in Mako. I won't show you all of them because I do want to keep some of it a secret. So Makonai is a city for the followers of the Most High. This is kind of a holy city. There's a can access function, so you don't have access to this unless this game flag is set. There are some structures here. For example, there's a church, there's an academy, there's the soul well with a character behind it. There's a guild with some items for sale. The guild is pretty prestigious, so like getting access to the guild is it's non-trivial. So like these items are for sale in this place, but like getting them is more involved than just going. You can see the opposite here, which is a trader who has some things for sale that these are very trivial to get. You just need the cost for them. There's another inn. There's a character at the inn called Makoto. There's a bank. At the bank, there's a character called Mothis. There's audio specifically for each location. There's latitude and longitude that I use in calculating the time it takes to travel between the two. And then there's a background image that's unique to all of them too, because I want it to feel unique. There's more settlements. I won't spoil them. The next one's Delabar. You're on your own finding that. Good luck. And then there's a travel manager. This is the calculation for longitude and latitude and time. There's a time per unit. It's really basic. Then we calculate the amount of units that you have to travel, and we give you a time based on that. Really lightweight. I think that probably covers... Oh, we haven't talked about monsters. Let's pick a monster. Let's go with the Blood Ooze. They're really basic. So they extend a monster class. They are a class of their own. Oops. They have a description. When you bleed near a source of power, you get a blood slime. This one's seen a lot of blood. It has a name called Blood Ooze. This isn't used yet. One of the things that scholars will get is access to more information than other classes, just about all different facets of the game. This obviously is not valid because it's not a wolf and it's not used, but the idea here is that you can get extra information by playing a scholar. Damage absorption, 0. Damage reduction, 0. HP, max HP, image asset path, XP value, the drop table. So there's two different parts of the drop table. There's an always drops and then an item with a drop chance. There's a bloodstone with a 5% chance to drop for this thing. There's a drop count. The drop count is how many items get pulled from the table. Or how many rolls get pulled from the table. So for example, if it has 3 items and always drop and then 1 item here, like this one item, you will always get these 3 items. Then, for each item, for each number in the drop count, so if it's 3, I will roll on this table 3 times. If you get the item, it will continue to roll. Technically, you could get 5 or 3 bloodstones on 3 drops in 1 kill. The odds of that happening are pretty slim, but that's kind of how this works. We give it some max HP. We make it variable, so it's a little interesting. And then we set the HP equal to max HP. Again, the oozes, they're pretty easy. They drop 1 to 4 essence whenever you kill them. And then their combat action's really basic. They cause you to take some damage. The ooze slimes you for damage. That's it. That's kind of how they work. There's some other things in here that are way more involved. I'm trying to find something that wouldn't be super spoilery. I mentioned alpha already. So this is one of the game's like core bosses. It's called the Alpha Dragon. It's the first dragon. Its name is Alpha. Again, this isn't valid. This is not actually in the game yet. The reason I wanted to show this is that it has something called damage reduction. So this is a % reduction. This is flat absorption. So if you were hit for 100 damage, you would take 70 because you have a 30% reduction. If you had a 5 here, you would take 100 damage reduced by 30%, so 70 minus 5, so 65 damage. I just wanted to mention how those stats work. And then, yeah, dragons need cool attacks, PvP raw. This needs to be better, so that's something I'll have to sort out too. There's some items, there are some that do things. It's hard to actually click into these because a lot of these are spoilery. Some items are sellable, so there's an abstract class here that they can implement called get value and get ID. You can sell these to merchants, so if you get them, for example, the banana is not sellable. Also lots of puns, pop culture references, because that's kind of who I am. Yeah, and then man, I feel like I just keep having more and more stuff to talk about. Weapons. So this is equipment. There's no such thing as weapons versus helmets versus whatever. They're all equipment. They're equipment and they go in a slot. So in our case, this is a sword called Flamberg. It's a fiery sword whose blades burn with a hot intensity. It gives you a modifier to a lot of things. And then it has a very unique combat action. So this one is specific to this weapon. It also requires both hands. That may change. This combat action gives you some RNG, and then if the RNG is a certain number, you will also heal in addition to deal damage. That's it. I mentioned the Icicle earlier. This is the one that gives that debuff called Icicle Frosted. So you deal damage and you add this debuff, and then if you get to a certain number of debuffs, it's 3, you remove Icicle Frosted and deal bonus damage, and it ignores defense. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm working with. I mean, there are a lot of different weapons. There are staves, there are shields, robes, rings, headgear, hammers, footwear, daggers, bows, Deep Rock Galactic reference, Cult of Rock and Stone. This is a tome, a book that's apparently about rock and stone. Weird. Yeah, it gives you an arcane mod and a constitution mod. There's a book called Hellfire. This is a very dangerous but powerful book. It is rumored that the book itself was thrown into Sheol from the gates of hell. Spooky! Anyways, there's an arcane mod on this one. And the combat action's interesting. It takes away about 1/4 of your HP and gives you a buff called Heated Up. It then says you begin to read from your tome, the book ignites your hands, damaging you, but you feel an intense heat swelling inside of you. We talked about Heated Up before. This gives you a 2.5 times damage multiplier. Here's the catch. This is your main hand. So you can't combat action Heated Up and then also like smack with a sword or something. So who would use this? Casters. Casters would use this. This gives casters the option to hurt themselves for a turn to deal massive damage the following turn. Pair that with something like Tricast. Chef's kiss. Okay. Yeah, I think that covers it. There are consumables too. Don't read too much into those. But there's a health potion here that grants health and removes the health potion from your inventory after it does it. The reason that items are responsible for removing themselves from the inventory is because some items are reusable and they may not remove themselves, or they may not be removed upon use. So that's something to think about too. These are characters. I hadn't talked about characters yet. So this is Feldar. We've basically seen most of the stuff that Feldar can give you from dialogue and whatnot. So he has the ability to give you quests. Again, this takes in a game state. We look at the game flags to determine if you've done combat. If you have not done combat, you can't get quests from him. If you've done the combat tutorial, you can get quests. There's a get dialogue function. There's a get background function. You probably noticed this. The huntsman background is this background. If you go to the inn, it's this background. If you go to the church, it's this background. The whole point is that there are different backgrounds and people exist in different places, and part of the creating that experience is giving people different backgrounds. So we do that. I do that. The dialogue here takes in game state. This one's complicated. It looks at flags. It determines what to do based on the flags. Oscus is much worse. I won't show that one, but it's long. It's lengthy. So we return dialogue. Here's some items. So if your progression with Oscus is 2, you get this dialogue. And then there's post-game dialogue or post-dialogue trigger. So we increment Oscus progression,
and then we increment set has scrying orb to true because he gives you a scrying orb, which you see right here. We read this, we talked through this too. This is just a pop-up that shows you the information about the scrying orb. If you have done the combat tutorial and you have not received the post-combat tutorial speech, you get the post-combat tutorial speech. If you have not done the combat tutorial and your right-hand slot is empty, sorry, not empty. Oh, I was expecting a bigger weapon. Well, a little knife like that will probably be fine. Okay. Post-dialogue trigger. He heals you to full afterwards. That's why this is here. And then, yeah, sets an index and calls save and refresh on the game state. Okay, otherwise you get this dialogue. Ah, great, you're ready to get to work on those pelts. Normally I'd have you find them around the world, blah, 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 post-dialogue trigger. And then if you get down to these, so you've hit every other case, you get a random dialogue that kind of captures his personality. That's the goal. And not only does it capture his personality, but it may tell you about lore in the game too, which is good. So you want to read, you want to learn. Sometimes they'll say things that are maybe like this one. This one is just, this is personality. It's not anything critical to the game. He says, you ever have those days where you just don't want to get to work? You know you have to because people depend on you, and you will, but you don't want to. Today is one of those days. Whatever. This, lore information. This, lore information. Very relevant lore information. This, he's telling you that he will buy these items from you. So, yeah. Yeah, there are quite a few characters. The incredible Mr. Ooze. I'm going to say it again. I feel like that covers everything. And then I'm probably going to realize that I missed something completely. We talked about quests. We've lightly talked about achievements. There are just a lot of widgets that I made, just like you would if you're building a Flutter application. Pull things out to widgets, make them reusable, follow clean code practices, like take care of your application, because as it starts to get this big, you'll really appreciate the areas that you did take care of versus the ones that you didn't, because Lord have mercy, I have both. We talked about achievements. They're the one thing that I think we actually have not covered yet. So let's talk really quickly about those because they'll be quick. So achievement looks like this. It's a class, it has a name, you get a date time that you've earned it at, a value, and then milestones and descriptions. So if we go to the achievement engine, we can see a list of the achievements that are hard-coded into the engine. So you have the Ocean Calls to Me, you've made it to Delabar, the Holy Land, you've made it to Konai, typo. Clowning Around, you've made it to the Big Top, Mithril Weaponry, equip a Mithril Weapon, Secrets of the Sanguine, you've unlocked Forbidden Powers, Grogmar Smash, you've defeated Grogmar, Alpha, you've defeated the first, Omega, you've defeated the last, S Collector, this one has milestones, so you've collected a lot of essence, so you'll get different tiers based on the milestones you hit. You've donated a lot of essence, that type of stuff. And then the Hidden Monster Tracker achievement that I mentioned, that is relevant for the data that you can get at the Academy. This has been a really long video. I think I'm just going to go ahead and stop here. I think we've covered, I could go into every single building in the settlement and talk through each of those and how they behave differently. I would rather you play the game and explore that on your own. I will show one more thing. This is so silly, but I have a lot of assets in my assets folder, like a ton of assets. I don't use all of them, at least yet. The plan is to use all of them at some point, but I don't want to bundle assets that I'm not using because it will make my app bundle and my IPA way too big. So I wrote this tiny little script, and this searches all of my files for assets that I am using and then transforms it. So an example here, projects, barcode game, okay, clear that, let's try again. So if I run tool, find assets, this is it. It takes, it's sourced, sorry, I've been talking for a long time. It finds all the assets that are actually being used in my files, my source files, and outputs them in YAML, so I can copy them, come back to my pub spec, and then just paste them right down here. Again, this is the script. If you want to, you can copy it, you can use it. Have at it. I guess on that note, this is not open source. This is my personal game. This is my project. I'm just walking you through the code out of interest, and I kind of also want to talk about the game that I built because I spent a lot of time building it, and it was really fun. It continues to be really fun too. We still have some more things to fix, obviously, and then we have some things that I want to do on top of fixes, like new features. So this code is not available to peruse freely. Everything in the video is obviously available because this will be a public video. So walk through the code, find what you like in the video. Feel free to copy anything, copy any ideas. I can't promise, let's bring this back up. I can't promise that the math or the game logic is actually any good. It seems to work fine for me. But yeah, if you do copy into that, maybe tinker with the numbers and find something that works well for you or your game. And again, just a takeaway, like, it's fun. It's a fun game that I enjoy playing. I enjoy the barcode scanning. The menuing is one of the hardest parts for me in building games, and Flutter makes menuing easy. And I guess what I'm getting at is, like, you can use Flame and you can learn the Flutter game engine, Flame, if you want to learn that type of stuff, but you don't have to build a game in Flutter. And that's one of the things that I think is just really fascinating. In my case, the only thing that is kind of complicated that a game engine might be helpful for, like a game rendering engine, would be the animation for combat. And you can totally just do that with an animation controller like I did. So I think that's it. I'll go ahead and end this now for everyone's sake. Thanks for sticking through to this video. I appreciate it. I do Flutter stuff and JavaScript stuff and some other stuff on my channel. If you want to learn more, just kind of follow along and see what someone else is up to. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell to make sure you get notifications when new videos come out, and let me know what your thoughts are below. How does this game kind of meet your expectations? Do you consider this a game? I do. Let me know below. How could I forget? Memories of Sheol, available on iOS and Android. I'll put a link in the description with links to both. Play the game, let me know your thoughts, and join us on our subreddit as well. Toodles.